Someone in your life is draining you right now. You know exactly who I'm talking about. You felt it the moment I said it, that quiet, heavy ache living somewhere between your chest and your throat. And yet, every single morning, you wake up and carry their weight like it was always meant to be yours. But it was never yours. It never was. The Stoics had a name for this. They called it borrowed suffering, the slow, silent art of bleeding for wounds that don't belong to you. Marcus Aurelius once sat in complete silence after a devastating betrayal, not to mourn, not to rage, but to uncover one brutal truth that most people never discover in their entire lifetime. What was that truth? We'll get there. But first, be honest with yourself. How many versions of yourself have you buried trying to keep someone else comfortable? You were not born to be someone's emotional graveyard. You were not forged through fire and darkness, just to dissolve inside someone else's storm. And somewhere deep inside you, beneath the guilt, beneath the false loyalty, beneath the endless cycle of hoping they will finally change, there's a man who is done. Done waiting. Done bleeding. Done making himself smaller than he was ever meant to be. This video is for that man. This message is not for everyone. But if you're still watching, it was built for you. Here's the identity crisis no one warns you about. The longer you suffer for someone who doesn't deserve your suffering, the more you begin to confuse your pain with your purpose. You start to believe that loving someone means destroying yourself for them. That loyalty means silence. That strength means endurance without limit. But that is not strength, that is slow, invisible self-erasure. The Stoics understood that identity is not given. It is built, one decision at a time, in the forge of self-discipline and intentional solitude. Epictetus, who was once a literal slave in chains, taught us that the only true freedom lies in mastering your inner world. He lost everything on the outside, but no one could touch what lived within him. The question is, who are you becoming while you suffer? Are you growing into steel or dissolving into ash? Because here is what the most dangerous, most grounded men in history understood. They never gave another human being the power to author their pain. Subscribe if you are building yourself in silence, because the lesson that comes next will hit differently than anything you have heard before. Lesson 1. Their peace is not your responsibility. There is a quiet war happening inside you every time someone you love spirals into chaos, and your first instinct is to rush in, to fix it, to sacrifice your own calm on the altar of their comfort. But the Stoics were merciless about this truth. You cannot pour your entire river into someone else's drought and expect to remain full. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Their peace is a mountain they must climb themselves. Your only job is to protect your own flame." Most men never learn this, but the ones who do, they change everything around them. Lesson 2. Suffering in silence is not loyalty. There is a lie that was handed to you, perhaps by culture, perhaps by someone who needed your suffering to justify their behavior, that staying silent in pain is somehow noble, that enduring it makes you a good man. But silence without boundaries is not loyalty. It is surrender dressed in virtue's clothing. Seneca warned us, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality, and yet we build elaborate prisons of imagined duty and lock ourselves inside willingly." The most loyal thing you can do for yourself is to speak the truth of your own pain, even when your voice shakes, even when no one understands, even when the room goes silent. Lesson 3. Attachment is the root of your torment. What if I told you that the person causing you the most pain right now has far less power than you think? The Stoics taught that it is never the event itself that destroys us. It is our attachment to the outcome. You are not suffering because of what they did. You are suffering because of what you needed them to be, and they were not it. That gap between who they are and who you needed them to be, that is where your torment lives. Close that gap, not by changing them, because you cannot, but by releasing the version of them that only ever existed inside your mind. Lesson 4. The Dragon of Expectation. Every disappointment you have ever felt in a relationship has one silent author: expectation. You expected honesty. You expected loyalty. You expected growth. And when reality shattered those expectations like glass against stone, you called it betrayal. But the Stoics called it a lesson you weren't ready for yet. Epictetus taught us to desire only what is within our control and to release everything that isn't. The dragon of expectation will burn down everything you love if you let it breathe inside your chest unchecked. Kill the dependency, not the feeling. Watch how quickly your suffering loses its fuel. Few people apply this. That is exactly why so few people are ever truly free. Lesson 5. Your emotions are data, not destiny. Here is something almost nobody realizes. Your emotions are not commands. They are information. When you feel pain because of another person, your emotions are not screaming at you to stay and suffer more. They are quietly whispering that something needs to change. The Stoics treated emotions like weather, real, undeniable, sometimes violent, but never permanent and never the captain of the ship. Marcus Aurelius walked into war, into betrayal, into unspeakable grief, and he never let the storm inside become the storm outside. You are allowed to feel everything, but you are not required to obey everything you feel. The man who masters this distinction becomes unmovable. Lesson 6. Boundaries are not walls, they are architecture. There is a dangerous misunderstanding around the word boundaries that keeps men suffering far longer than necessary. A boundary is not a cold wall that keeps people out. It is architecture that determines how people are allowed to exist inside your world. When you have no architecture, everyone walks through every room, leaving their chaos, their noise, their damage behind like uninvited guests who never leave. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere. If you let everyone into everything, you lose yourself completely." Build your architecture deliberately. Decide what you will accept, and then hold that line like a warrior, holding a narrow mountain pass in the dead of winter. Lesson 7. Forgiveness is for you, not for them. Here is the hardest pill the Stoics ever offered, and most people never swallow it. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a chain you remove from yourself. You have been dragging that chain through every morning, every sleepless night, every quiet moment that should have been yours but was stolen by their memory instead. The cave of resentment feels like power, but it is a prison with no window and no door. Marcus Aurelius forgave rivals, betrayers, and enemies, not because they deserved it, but because he refused to let them live rent-free in the empire of his mind. Time is moving whether you act or not. Lesson 8. Solitude is your greatest teacher. In the darkness that comes just before transformation, there is always solitude. Most men run from it. They fill the silence with noise, with distractions, with people who cost more than they give, because the silence forces a confrontation with the self they have been avoiding for years. But the Stoics walked deliberately into that silence. They sat with it the way a blacksmith sits beside fire, close enough to feel the heat, disciplined enough not to be consumed by it. Solitude will show you who you are when no one is watching, when no one is applauding, when the stage is empty. What you discover there will either break you or forge you into steel. Most men never find out which, will you? Lesson 9. The man who suffers for others becomes invisible to himself. This is the lesson that ties all others together, and it is the one most men discover far too late. At the end of years they can never reclaim. Every hour you spend suffering for another person is an hour you spend abandoning yourself. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, you begin to disappear. Your dreams become background noise. Your growth becomes a footnote. Your identity becomes a dim reflection of someone else's needs and someone else's chaos. The Stoics called this the ultimate theft, Not of your money, not of your time, but of your becoming. Someone else is already becoming what you keep delaying. You cannot reclaim those years, but you can decide right now, in this exact moment, that this suffering stops here. Close your eyes for a moment. Not literally, you're watching this, but let your mind travel forward 6 months from now. Picture the version of you who chose differently, who woke up one morning and said, quietly but firmly, "Not anymore." That man stands differently. He speaks differently. He moves through the world with a weight that is not heaviness, but density. The density of a man who knows exactly who he is and what he will no longer accept. He is not cold. He is not bitter. Bitterness is only unexpressed grief wearing a mask. He is clear. He is focused. He no longer bleeds for people who would not bandage his wounds. He no longer stays in rooms that slowly suffocate him. His relationships are cleaner, deeper, built on truth rather than desperation, on genuine connection rather than emotional ransom. And here's the most powerful image I want to leave inside your mind before this video ends. That man already exists. He is not a fantasy built from wishful thinking. He is the version of you waiting on the other side of one decision, one commitment, one moment where you look at your own suffering and say, with your whole chest, "This ends with me." 6 months from now, you will look back at this exact moment, right now, this second, and either thank yourself for listening or regret yourself for scrolling away. The forge is ready. The only question is whether you will step into it. This is where most men stop. They feel the fire. They see the vision. They get the chills. And then they walk right back into the same patterns, because transformation requires something that inspiration alone can never give. Daily, deliberate, disciplined action in the quiet moments, when no one is watching and no one is cheering for you. The Stoics did not simply philosophize from comfortable chairs. They practiced. Every single morning, Marcus Aurelius sat in the darkness before dawn and rehearsed his principles before the world arrived to test them. That is your assignment now. Not tomorrow. Not after one more conversation with the person who keeps draining you. Now, decide what you will no longer accept. Write it down. Hold it like a sword that belongs only to you. You were not forged to suffer for people who do not value your wholeness. The storm has passed. The mountain is waiting. And the man you are becoming is already on the other side, looking back, proud. Drop a comment below and tell me which lesson hit you hardest. Subscribe if you are becoming in silence. The world does not need more broken men. It needs more built ones. Rise,